You woke? Time to get up. Welcome to the Sponsor Walk No Speed Limit podcast. I hope you guys are having a terrific day. I am your host, Alvin. I know it's been a while, and maybe your first time listening to this. If it is your first time listening to this, and I know it's been a while, we're trying to get back in the groove again. Make sure you hit that like, share, and subscribe button, okay? So, guys, what's going on with our military right now? What's going on with the Trump administration? Well, let's talk about an incident that happened yesterday. So, supposedly Jeffrey Goldberg, editor-in-chief of The Atlantic, was accidentally included in a group chat from Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth. The chat gave specific details about planned strikes on Houthi rebels in Yemen. If you don't know anything about who the Houthi rebels are, they are an Iran-backed militant group that is opposed to the Saudi-backed group in Yemen. And they've been in war with them for a while, the Saudi-backed government of Yemen. So they've been in war with them for quite some time. Houthis have called themselves being allies of Hezbollah in Israel. So what they've been doing is attacking shipping in the Red Sea. They've done everything from, of course, like boarding ships, firing on ships, firing on U.S. Navy, French, and other military vessels in that area. So the United States, under Trump, has decided that they are going to launch an operation to try to curb the Yemen's appetite for attacking shipping in the Red Sea. Now, talking about this particular situation, what happened yesterday or a few days ago, this is very interesting. Jeffrey Gold.
I get a message request to connect with Mike Waltz, who's the National Security Advisor, or someone who's purporting to be Mike Waltz. Not an unusual thing in Washington. I'm a journalist. I've met him in the past. So I accept it. Nothing happens. I sort of forget about it. And then a couple of days later, I'm added to a group of seemingly very, very high national security officials of the United States. I think that this is a spoof. I think that someone is running a hoax.
Like a disinformation campaign at this point.
Yeah. The main reason I thought that actually was that it seemed completely absurd to me that the national security leadership of the United States would be meeting on a messaging app to discuss forthcoming military action, and that they would also sort of invite the editor of The Atlantic magazine to that conversation. So I tracked this for a while, obviously, to see what was going on and see who was trying to entrap me or trick me. There's a long conversation on Friday, the day before, about whether they should or shouldn't take this action in Yemen. It's a robust conversation. It's actually pretty impressive in some ways. They're going back and forth. A lot of resentment directed at European allies of the United States, which obviously enhanced the credibility of this chain, because everybody in the chain sounded like the people I know who are in this administration. Nevertheless, it wasn't until Saturday that I was reasonably certain that this wasn't a hoax, that I had actually mistakenly been included in a conversation of the Principals Committee, essentially the leaders of the national security community, including the head of the CIA, in this discussion of whether the Houthis should be attacked in Yemen.
So we got to ask a question. What's going on with our government here? Jeffrey Goldberg should not have been on this, because this is national security. This is very specific details of stuff our military is doing. By the way, I've looked this up. I think there's over 400,000 Americans, soldiers in the Middle East, and a few more in Africa, right along the Red Sea. So there's a good number of 400,000 American personnel that are in the area that the information that was given out could possibly put in danger, including those who are committed to the strikes. And that could also mean that they can move people if this information gets out to the Houthis, right? So we know that this information got out to Jeffrey Goldberg. The question is, did this information get out to any other people, the Russians included, or the Chinese, or even the Iranians? How did Jeffrey Goldberg end up with this information, ended up in this blockchain? A simple mistake means somebody's about to lose their job, right? You know, that's the only thing I can think of. The only reason that particular thing happened. Now, we've talked about that, right? That's the major news story right now, and you know that's why I do the talk. That's why I do this podcast, so I can rant and rave about stuff that's going on in our government. One other thing that happened last week was the supposed expelling of Venezuelan immigrants who were supposedly members of the MS-13 or one of the other Venezuelan gangs here. You know, there has been some news of late of Venezuelan gangs supposedly breaking in the house of NFL and NBA players, stealing memorabilia and other things in their house, values of any wealth to steal. So Donald Trump claims that his group, that ICE is dealing with this, that he has taken some people out of the country that are a member of gangs. Here's a question I have. They did not do this by due process. What it was is there's an act from 1798 called the Alien Sedition Act. It's for people during war. The last time this was used was World War II, when we were actually at war with a country. In that act, you know, people who were German or Italian or Japanese could be expelled from the country or put into concentration camps, as the Japanese were done during that time. What they're done here is they're using this act from 1798 to expel these so-called Venezuelan gang members. Now, we don't know which ones were gang members or weren't. They claim that all of them were, but we're coming to find out that some of these people weren't, and there may even have been some American citizens or legal residents that were included in the people that were sent over here, and now we have no contact with them because they're in Venezuela, and they have no rights whatsoever over there. They're in their prison and their jail, not allowed to have contact, not allowed to talk to anybody. They're probably not even getting a lawyer right now. Maybe beat down, and half of them may be dead by now. Who knows? Because Donald Trump and his crew decided to dispel these people. Now, another thing that happened in this whole process was this guy named Mahmoud Khalil. He was here on a student visa. He was, I believe, at Columbia University. During the war that happened with Israel and Hamas, the young man was protesting because, you know, there was what he called indiscriminate bombing and death of Palestinians in Gaza. And so he, along with others, organized protests where, you know, students sat in, people at buildings, they created tent cities and did all those things. The United States has expelled him from the country, saying that he is anti-American, that he has made anti-American rhetoric, and they're detaining him. He's not expelled from the country. It was alleged that he may be at Guantanamo Bay. He has since denied the allegations against him. He's also talked about how the United States is denying his rights. He is a legal resident. He is a green card holder. Therefore, he has many of the same freedoms that Americans who are American citizens have. And as a student, you know, one of the things the school is supposed to do is encourage their students to express their First Amendment rights. It is our right of Americans, or it should be of anyone, to protest or say how they feel or express how they feel, as long as it is not violent, as long as it's not traitorous, as long as it's not against the United States, as in a way which would harm the United States. And again, he was opposed to the war because his family, his people are from Palestine, and many of them were affected by the war. Many of them had died. People were hurt. People were displaced from their homes. All these things that we talk about all the time, right? So he was protesting this, just like the Americans that were there. But Trump, who is a big ally of Israel, decided that this man was a threat, and therefore he deserved to be deported, arrested, so on and so forth. So they're still trying to figure out what they're going to do with that. Now, here's the question. Both of these things are tied up in the courts. The Venezuelan gangs, actually, there was a court injunction against it, and Trump, border czar, I won't even talk about this dude, decided that, hey, we were over international waters. It was beyond the authority of the government. They were already headed to Venezuela. Too late. The court order. Now the court is, of course, investigating the truth behind this. What did they actually defy the court order, so on and so forth. The border czar basically said, I don't care about the opinions of the court or any opposition to what we do. We're going to do it anyway. Then he comes on this weekend on Face the Nation and some other programs, and he claims that they will follow the law. Yeah, we will. But you can see the reluctance in his voice, and he said, "Yeah, I don't care about their opinion. We're going to continue to do what we do, what we think is best for the United States." Yada yada yada. Now, some of y'all cheering loud right now. You're like, "Yeah, that's wonderful." But defining the Constitution of the United States is something we should not cheer. If they defy the Constitution of the United States in the process of doing all these things that they're doing to people, then there's a problem. That goes even with other actions that the government is taking right now. And when I talk about, let's talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion. Let's talk about what Trump has done in an executive order this week that is disturbing to me. So, in a executive order that he put out this week, Trump has literally allowed segregation a doorway back in. What do I mean by a doorway back in? So, Lyndon B. Johnson, before he left office, took out, made a executive order in which he, along with the Civil Rights Bill, he made it illegal for the government to give contracts to anyone who discriminated, anyone who segregated against people of color, people because of all the conditions that are in the Civil Rights Bill, right? So if you discriminated, you did any of those things like separate bathrooms, all those things, separate bathroom for black people, separate fountains, or you just told them they can't eat at your restaurant, do things like that, or your business, you couldn't get government grants for your business or loans or any of those things, right? Well, Trump decided that everything's going to be merit-based. So he decided that he would rescind that order, and he blamed it on Biden, even though the executive order was done by Lyndon B. Johnson and had been followed ever since Lyndon B. Johnson back in 1960s. Now, one caveat to that is Trump said, even though we're doing this, that you are still subject to the civil rights laws. Based on this, it doesn't seem like the civil rights laws matter. As long as they got the money in their hand, who cares? These businesses are like, well, we'll still do what we do. So it begs to wonder what's going to happen with this, because segregation is still illegal in this country because of the Voting Rights Act of 1965, which was voted on by Congress and signed by then Lyndon B. Johnson. But here goes a president of the United States saying that he is okay with segregation. So that brings me back to my other situation with him. Now, before I go on, let me tell you a story. I want to tell you a story because that made me bring up this story. I brought this story up on TikTok. If you watch my TikTok videos, you'll see it. So, I was born in 1973. Okay? So, I was born at the end of all the big civil rights movements, and there was some still going on, like Black Panthers and things like that. So, I was a young man in this country. I grew up in Birmingham in transition. there was also this thing called white flight, where black people were moving into these white neighborhoods because they could, and the housing was available now. And white people were saying, okay, well, if you're going to move here, I'm leaving. I'm going to go out to the suburbs, go out there for other reasons. And, they partially blamed that on the industrial situation in Birmingham. Birmingham was a highly industrialized city. So people literally moved out of their houses. Some of them sold them. Some of them rented, subleased or rented them to folks. Some of them kept their houses so you couldn't get the housing. And it's called white flight. So today we still have that imbalance in Birmingham. Birmingham proper, the city itself, is predominantly black. The suburbs are predominantly white, most of them, not all of them. Places like Bessemer and Fairfield, Brighton, some other smaller municipalities that are predominantly African American. But for the most part, if you go out to the suburbs, especially the most successful ones, they are mostly predominantly white. Black people have moved there as well. But for the most part, you can also see the economic difference. Birmingham, for instance, the average income is around $53,000 a family. The average income for the suburbs is $80,000. Now, why am I talking about this? Like I said, as a young man, I didn't grow up during the Civil Rights Movement, but I did read about what happened here in Birmingham. We talk about terrorism all the time, and like Trump labeled these Venezuelan gangs terrorists, so he shipped them out of the country. No one's ever labeled the Ku Klux Klan a terrorist organization that should be expelled from the country, as they should, or Proud Boys, or 3%ers, or any of these other organizations that are extreme in some kind of way. They've never been labeled as such. In fact, they were pardoned for the incident that happened on January 6th, 2021, right? Getting back to the main subject here. As a young man, I walked into the county courthouse of Birmingham, Alabama. There's a mural inside the courthouse that's been there for decades. It is of slaves working in the field, and they're so proud of that mural, some people want it removed. But that's not the most damning thing of all. You walk around the corner, and though a sign has been removed from the wall, there is imprinted on the wall a placket that says blacks only, whites only, above the water fountains. It is a vestige of the racism of the past in Birmingham. And when I think of what Donald Trump is doing, he's trying to bring back the past in so many ways. So then I'm going to go to another attack. Let's go back to the military, because, my original thing was the military. This whole thing I could go on all day about how incompetent that is. The military keeps talking about DEI and removing the vestiges of DEI and all those other things. So, I did some research. And why is this important, what I'm about to tell you? Because this deals with what's going on with DEI in the military right now. Donald Trump decided to rename some bases after Confederate generals, saying that we're restoring our history. Now, if you know anything about the Confederacy was dynamically opposed to the United States, which was a country that wanted a continuous union, and the most important thing is end slavery. Because slavery was seen as an anti-democratic institution. Now, it wasn't something they wanted to get rid of right away, but they did want to preserve the Union. So the American soldiers you see today would be what we call Union soldiers. They are not Confederates. The Confederacy was opposed to everything that was American, including the American Constitution. I looked this up. So he restored these bases to the names of Confederate generals. Fort Benning, Fort Bragg, Fort Hood, Fort Lee, Fort Polk, Fort Gordon, Fort Rucker, Fort A.P. Hill, and Fort Pickett, and Camp Beauregard. All of these were Confederate generals. Lee, Fort Lee. Who is General Lee? General Lee was considered one of the main generals of the Confederate War, probably the leading general of the Confederacy, the smartest one. He led 2 campaigns, both into Maryland and to Pennsylvania, both of which ended in absolute failure. But here's the one thing that's a caveat to that. They literally, on their marches, would kidnap black men and women and children and send them into slavery in the South. This man that they've honored with a name on a base back in the 1920s when racism was at its peak and segregation was at its peak, they named a base after him. Fort Bragg, Fort Hood, Fort Benning. These are all generals that operated in these theaters and under them. Fort Polk, Fort Gordon, Rutger, A.P. Hill, Pickett, Beauregard. All these are Republican generals that Trump says we are going to honor by renaming the bases after them. But here's the kicker. Because of DEI, black names are being removed from military history. Let me give you one of those names. William Harvey Carney, a Union soldier who fought during the Civil War. He was given the Medal of Honor in 1900, and some people say he's the first. He was not actually the first black person to receive a Medal of Honor, but we'll leave that alone. There were like 20 others that got it before he did. That's not the importance here. He was a Civil War Union veteran. The men across from him were Confederates that fired upon this man, that wounded this man in a battle where he was fighting for the freedom of people that look like him. And I put his picture up here because I want you to, right here. I put his picture up here so you could see this man who was fighting for his freedom, because I want y'all to see it. William Carney Carvey. So at the Battle of Fort Wagner, and if any of y'all have ever seen the movie of Glory, William Carney is the man who picks up the colors when they're going across it. This was a major battle. This was a failed assault on that particular fort. He picks up the colors after the color bearer is killed. He holds on, moves forward with that, despite all of his injuries and having to crawl back to Union lines after the battle was over. He held on to those colors. He was the color bearer. That was a big thing during war back then. So he received his Medal of Honor in 1900 for what he did. But in the process, he severely wounded a leg, severely wounded an arm, almost was shot in the head. And this guy right here was discharged. This is how bad his wounds were. He was discharged from the military. When other guys may not have been back in those days. He was discharged from the military. That's how bad his wounds were. Another person that has been removed was Charles Calvin Rogers. He was a lieutenant colonel during the Vietnam War. Lieutenant colonel during the Vietnam War who, despite his injuries, led his men in a serious engagement that against the Viet Cong who were attacking at the time. He led his men. They won the engagement to the very end. He died recently. Well, not recently. He died in the 90s. But he was the highest ranking general to receive, or officer to receive, the Medal of Honor. Now, why do I want to talk about that? So again, I've explained to you, they've named these bases after these Confederate generals who were opposed to the United States, who almost got arrested and jailed after the war for the crimes they committed against the United States, but instead they were pardoned, just like the January 6th folks. But they're removing the names of black men, Buffalo Soldiers. They're removing the 99th Division, the 23rd Battalion, the 238th Battalion, I believe. A decorated unit from World War II that lived in segregated American Army bases, who fought from beginning to end of that war, from their time of deployment to the end of the war, bravely. The Tuskegee Airmen. They're trying to remove these things, but they won't. They will put a Confederate military general's name on the base. Now, they claim that they're going to fix this. That this is not what they meant by removing DEI, and they're apologizing and all that thing. The one that you keep hearing, the name that you keep hearing is Jackie Robinson. Jackie Robinson, Jackie Robinson. I get saying about Jackie Robinson. Jackie Robinson was serving in the military but refused to go to war or fight in the war, and he was dishonorably discharged illegally because of what he did. He was court-martialed and discharged because he refused to go to war. And that's an honorable thing to me, because why fight in a war where they don't want you there in the first place? What would be the point? But these other men that they're erasing did fight. Some of them are buried at Arlington Cemetery because of their service and what they've done for this country. So the very fact that the men who were opposed to this country are honored is sick. It's sad. But of course, this is the administration we have in office now. Meanwhile, someone like William Harvey Carney, who actually fought and died for this country, that didn't love him because of the color of his skin. Because of the color of his skin, we're dishonorably removing his name from the books. Of course, now, again, I keep hearing Trump say, hey, we're going to try to fix that. We're going to reverse that. That's not what we meant to do. That's not what we meant by DEI. Of course, we want to honor the history of our American heroes. But you did it. You removed them from the books, from history books. You know what? I'm sitting here spending my time, and I noticed some things. If you ain't white, you ain't right, according to these folks. The Venezuelans, you made an excuse to get them out of this country, right? You said they were all gang members. Who's the gang members? Proud Boys? Aren't they gang members? Three Percenters? Aren't they gang members? Did not members of those organizations try to storm the Capitol and beat up on police? And we pardoned them? But then we're going to say the Venezuelan gangs are the worst threat to the United States ever and they got to go. Well, who's next on your list? Because I hear you want to come out with Black Lives Matter. I hear you want to come to urban neighborhoods and put police and military people on the streets. What's next for this administration? People say, oh, stop talking. Oh, the media is just full of... No, these are the words of the current sitting president. And maybe I should put them right here so y'all can hear what he said.
Listen to what he said. We have the greatest military in the world, but you have to know how to use them. You have to know how to use them. But I protect you against outside enemies. But, I always say we have the outside enemy. So you can say China, you can say Russia, you can say Kim Jong-un, you can say... But that's not... It's going to be fun. If you have a smart president, no problem. It's the enemy from within. All the scum that we have to deal with that hate our country... That's a bigger enemy than China and Russia. Against American citizens. I think the bigger problem is the enemy from within, not even the people that have come in and destroying our country. By the way, totally destroying our country. The towns, the villages, they're being inundated. But I don't think they're the problem in terms of election day. I think the bigger problem are the people from within. We have some very bad people. We have some sick people, radical left lunatics. And I think they're and it should be very easily handled by, if necessary, by National Guard, or if really necessary, by the military.
So, ladies and gentlemen, am I lying? Am I not telling you the truth? Am I not telling you what this man plans to do or what is going on in our country right now? That American citizens are in danger, that our black history is being erased, even though I'm sure there's some of you who say, well, what about our history? Your history is important too. It's not just black people who are being erased. It's Native Americans or indigenous peoples information that's being removed. It's also Spanish folks are being removed from our history books and taken out of things, out of text. Now, our government has decided that don't happen here all the time. Well, folks, I've been talking a whole lot. I just want to say this one thing. I want to encourage you. There's a lot of negative information out there. There's a lot of things being said that are not positive at all. I want to say this, that every day you have an opportunity. You have a chance. Just like I'm sitting here in front of this computer, this is something that I want to do. This is something I wanted to do for years. And until, I believe it was 2019, I've been here since 73, I didn't do it. Then all of a sudden I heard this guy say one thing: if you want to start a business or start doing something, just do it. I'm telling you today, the one thing you can do, even in this crazy political climate the way it is start something. Do something. Now, I have another special that's coming up later on this week. I will be talking about immigration. I will also be talking about economics and how it works for minorities in this country and how it should work in the future for minorities in the country. Please stay tuned, and thank you again for listening. Peace.
You have been listening to Thought You Were Woke, No Speed Limit Podcast.